our session tonight, we are blessed again with two speakers. A familiar face to RCM, Pastor Rodel has been ministering at Trinity Bible Church of San Pablo for 40 years. His wife, Sister Haydee, is a full-time homemaker and helps him in the ministry. They have three grown-up children, Christine, Gideon, and Jonathan, and two lovable grandkids, Tori and Liza. They met when they were 16 years old and have been inseparable ever since. With the topic Staying Together, here is Pastor Adele and Sister Haydee Lasco.
Good evening, brothers and sisters. Good evening to all of you. Sister Haydee, you want to greet them first?
Good evening, everyone, and we are so happy and privileged to be here.
Okay, so again, good evening, everyone. And our topic for today is strengthening your marriage, your married life. And perhaps the first or the best way to start is try to imagine the future. I assume we're talking to some of you who probably just got married or are planning to get married. So try to visualize your future, say 20 years from now. And perhaps after the wedding, you may be thinking of something like this, that, hey, it's all fun and excitement, and it's going to be, living happily ever after. But of course, the reality is that after even just a few years, a lot of people, a lot of couples end up disappointed. And they ask the question, what happened to their marriage? Started so well and so promisingly. And so this evening, Sister Haydee and I would like to talk to you about how to strengthen your marriage. We realize there are many threats. If you're a Christian, you know that you're up against your sin, against the world, against the devil. There are many threats to a married relationship or a marriage relationship. In fact, perhaps it's even more common. Cooling of a marriage relations happens all the time, and perhaps even more than the reverse. We have heard of couples who, when kids leave, so this is like decades from now, if you're newly married, and they end up strangers, not really looking forward to spending every day together without the kids. And so how can spouses improve, maintain, enhance romance in their marriage? This is the question that we wrestled with as we are preparing for this lesson. And so our outline for tonight, first, we'd like to tell you about prioritizing your spiritual foundation, faithfully and gladly fulfilling your role. And these 2 points, Sister Haydee will discuss. And the last 2 points or tips on how to strengthen your marriage, fostering good communication, keeping romance and intimacy alive, yours truly will tackle it. So ready, Sister Haydee? Okay, let me turn this over to the one and only Sister Haydee, please.
Thank you po, Pastor Rodel. So our topic is about strengthening our marriage. So here we can say that the strength of any standing structure, it lies on the foundation. So the foundation is very critical because it provides the stability. For instance, you can see here the foundation of a skyscraper. It has to reach the bedrock because that is the portion where it is stable and solid. And so, for instance, the Petronas Tower in Kuala Lumpur, the foundation is like almost or more than 1/4 of the total height of the building. And so if engineers are giving much time and effort in building the foundation, but what about building lives, which has an impact on our society, diba? We have to have a strong foundation in the family. Why the family? Because the family has a direct impact in a society because the family is the basic unit of a society. What happens in a family is reflected in a society. So we can say that our influencers are not yung mga popular, mga movie stars, popular personalities, but the influencers in society are actually the husbands and the wives. And so this gives a tremendous responsibility to the husbands and wives because they impact lives, which impact the society ultimately. And so here we are talking about the foundation. We have to have a strong foundation for a marriage, relationship. And what we'll be sharing to you tonight are not actually new. These principles are very common. And I think our contribution to you, being married for 42 years, is that to tell you and probably for you to see na these are doable. These biblical principles are doable by the grace of God. And along the way, you will reap rewards and more rewards are coming. So it's really a happy life, no? Okay, so let's start with the foundation because you have to have a solid foundation for a strong and solid marriage relationship. And the first one is spiritual foundation. And our verse here is Psalms 127 verse 1. Unless the Lord builds the house, they labor in vain who build it. We are familiar with the love triangle, and the meaning is corrupted already. No? But we come up with a Christian love triangle. And a Christian love triangle has a good lesson to teach us. From this figure, you can see that if, of course, ang assumption natin ay you are both Christians, no? As the husband draws closer to God, and the wife draws closer to God as well, you can see that you are getting closer also to each other, forming an equilateral, stable triangle. So dapat yung, for a marriage to succeed, dapat mas mahal mo ang Lord kaysa sa mas mahal mo yung asawa mo. Okay ba yun?
Yeah.
But the thing here is if you drift away from God, then you will also drift away from each other. And so there lies the importance of spiritual foundation. Now, but it does not end there, no? Meron kang spiritual foundation, but this spiritual foundation has to be nurtured. At papaano, no? How can we strengthen that spiritual foundation? Our goal is to enlarge that Christian love triangle, that it fills the house, no? We have that invisible love triangle. And so how can we strengthen that? How can we enlarge that invisible Christian love triangle? First is our personal walk with God. At alam natin yan. So both of you should be actively doing that every day. Quiet time, Bible reading, praying, book reading, if possible, listening to sermons. Because as stated in Matthew 4:4, man does not live by bread alone, but on every word that comes out of the mouth of God. So that is our daily sustenance. So kung hindi ka kumain maghapon, di ba, you will starve and you will feel weak. So kung wala kang daily intake of the word of God, then you will also be vulnerable to a lot of enemies around us. At alam natin na ang target nila is to put us down. And so that is number one. And number two is you end the day together in prayer. So this is very important. Kasi sabi nga sa 1 Thessalonians 5:15, so encourage each other and build each other up just as you are already doing. Kasi when you end the day together in prayer, hindi lang naman basta talaga kayo magpe-pray. Nandun yung mga kumustahan o what happened to you today, ganyan. Ano yung mga blessings mo? What are your prayer requests? So you are encouraging each other daily. And another thing is, it will also keep you from prolonged anger. Kasi di ba sabi, do not let the sun go down upon your anger. And so, you are somehow forced, no, or motivated to settle your differences because you know that you will be facing each other. And so kung ginagawa nyo nga yun and then magkagalit kayo, di ba? It's just like you are being hypocrites. And then number 3 is to strengthen that spiritual foundation is to yung family devotion, no? Kung meron kayong, pwede rin naman, no? Kahit wala pa kayong anak. Although yun na nga yun pala, yung point number 2. But yung family devotion, when you have children, it requires commitment and consistency. This is the key ingredients for a successful family devotion. And we have to seize the time when our children are still our captive audience to shape their conscience, and you are forming their character. And so it's just like we are writing on the tablet of their hearts. And for us, what we did before, and I tell you, mahirap nga, but then it's doable. We start with prayer ni Pastor Rodel, and then we have hymn books. May tigigisa kaming hymn books, and then we sing a hymn, and then we share blessings, bawat isa, and then there's a short meditation of the word, then sharing of prayer requests, and then closing prayer. Yon. Of course, ito ay everyone is free to have their own system that will work for them, no? Depending on their availability ng family members. But the important thing here is to be committed and to be consistent. And then the next is yung consistent attendance in Sunday worship services. We know that Sunday is like feast for the soul, no? And we are being nourished by the word of God. So we are like feasting on his word. And let me share our experience ng mga early years pa ng marriage namin. And we were living in forestry. So marami sa inyo may alam na it's a uphill. You have to walk that uphill road going to the jeepney stop. And we actually leave home at 8 o'clock, so we can be will not be late at 9:30 service in San Pablo. And we had to take 3 rides. Kasi nga from the jeepney stop in forestry, punta ka ng crossing, sakay ka ulit ng jeep, 30 minutes yon, and then another ride sa tricycle. And with us, si Gideon, he's like 11 kilos. So parang isang tangke ng gas yung dala-dala mo. And imagine maglalakad ka dun sa uphill road. Buhat-buhat mo si Gideon. Of course, mostly si Pastor Rodel. Pero pag wala siya, syempre ako. So it was hard, pero hindi naman namin naisip na parang kanina ko lang na-realize that it was hard in these times na meron tayong mga sasakyan. And going back was also hard kasi kukunti na yung mga jeep at unahan sa sasakyan. But I can tell you that the Lord has honored our commitment. We hardly missed services and gatherings in the church. Kahit may bagyo, we were there. And we were also, hindi rin kami nalilate because my husband here is a very good leader. And so the Lord is really good. And so, yun nga, kasi it's hard to miss a Sunday intentionally because it will be hard to miss the succeeding Sundays. So that is very important, yung attendance to Sunday worship services to strengthen our spiritual foundation. And it is also important to see the value of fellowship. Although sometimes, of course, we are already hard-pressed sa ating mga daily works. But I look at them as like desserts or condiments that complement the spiritual food that we eat. So it spices up our spiritual lives. So that is also important. Now, the second point is the acceptance of one's role. You gladly accept, you yield to God's will for you, God's calling. and you gladly commit to that role, no, that God has given the husband and the wife. Of course, it's very clear in Ephesians 5:23 that the husband is the head. So he should rule or he should lead with a loving leadership. And the wife should submit. The wife should submit in everything to their husbands. And we are also called to be helpmeet, and we should be a gracious helpmeet because the Lord made created Eve to be a helpmeet for Adam. So ganun din tayo, no? We are helpmeet to our husbands. And so being a leader is very hard. It's not easy. And so as wives, we should be helping our leaders. We are helping our husbands to be good leaders. So we should affirm his leadership. We should encourage, support in his leadership role. It's not just for him to be a good leader. It's because he will be accountable to his family. Maging accountable siya sa Panginoon. At ayaw natin siyang we don't want him to displease the Lord. And that is why we are helping him in his leadership role. And so what are the ways on how we can help him to be a good leader? So number one is submission. Now, some people might say, hindi ba demeaning naman yan na you have to submit to your husband in everything? But submission is God's way of creating harmony in the family. And it is our deference to the appointed leader of our family. And so when we submit to our husbands, we are submitting to the Lord. And we are making him or helping him to be a good leader. And when if he becomes a good leader, then actually he will have a successful family. And then ultimately, di ba, we will be reaping the rewards of that success. Pabalik din sa atin. So that is indirectly, that is our reward for submitting to our husband. And then we should honor and respect our husbands. It's like we make him feel na he is the leader. Dapat maramdaman niya talaga na siya ay leader. At pag naramdaman niya na siya ay leader, then he will feel really responsible for his family. And then he will strive harder because he does not want to disappoint his children and his wife who are looking up to him. So it will help him if we really affirm his leadership role in our family. And of course, loving service. Not because he is capricious, maarte, gustong pagsilbihan, but actually, when we serve him, he feels loved. And again, it is also affirming his calling as a leader. And when we can serve our husband in a lot of ways. So marami tayong mga diskarte para ating pagsilbihan ng ating asawa. And we also love to serve him because we love him. And again, if we serve our husband, actually, ultimately, bumabalik din yun sa atin because they will also love to serve us. And we should help him reach his full potential as a person. When God created Eve to help Adam tend the garden, that is to make Adam more productive, more fruitful in keeping the garden of the Lord. And so tayo din, our aim is to make our husband be more fruitful in his job. We want him to reach his full potential. That should be our goal, to reach his full potential as a person. And what about us? Sasabihin naman ng iba, paano naman yung asawa? But I tell you, na bumabalik din kasi doon sa asawang babae. Because sabi nga, love begets love. So bumabalik din because the husband, in a way, will also be supportive of the wife. And then promote his well-being. You are the PR manager of your husband. So you don't tell bad things about him to people, you should also rebuke him. You should be the number one critic of your husband. And you can rebuke him, but of course, in a gentle way. That is why kami ni Pastor Rodel, he is the pastor. So lagi ako nasa unahan kasi tinitignan ko, ano yung baka may mannerism or something na he has to correct. And then we have some sign languages na kami nagkakaintindihan. So nako-correct agad. And so that is my goal for my husband, to promote his well-being. And so that he will reach his full potential. At yun nga, bumabalik din naman yun sa asawang babae. Okay. And for the wife, your role is to manage the household well, to be a home manager, as stated in Titus 2:5, wherein young mothers should be workers at home. And the how to do it is outlined beautifully in Proverbs 31, verses 10 to 31. Your goal is to create a happy home for your husband and your children so that they will feel happy, encouraged, and they are taught in the ways of the Lord. And the wife actually, she sets the tone in the house. And it is also important, like here in Proverbs 21:9, it is better to live in a corner of the housetop than in a house shared with a quarrelsome wife. So yung communication, the way you talk, that is very important. No? So our voice should be gentle. We should be encouraging, understanding. That is so that our children will be happy, our wife will be happy. So kung tayo ay naging wife, hindi masarap ang pakiramdam ng asawa na umuwi sa ating bahay. So remember that the wife sets the tone in the home. And it is also important, another important role of the wife is to train and teach our children. Especially in the formative years, the mind of the children are very malleable and teachable. And we can teach them a lot of things, but most of all, the things of the Lord. And our goal is to make them like Jesus, increasing in wisdom and in stature and in favor of God and men. So nandiyan na yung mga pagtuturo ng mga social graces and so many other things. And we can also jumpstart their academic performance by teaching them. And we have also observed that even children can learn to read at the age of 2. We observe that. And another important thing is to discipline our children. Now, why do we discipline our children? Of course, so that they will learn to obey the Lord. But primarily, the reason is, the main reason is, pinapalaki natin ang ating mga anak because we want them to have a better life. But then if they will be disobeying the Lord, and they cannot obey the Lord because foolishness is found in their hearts. So we have to help them obey the Lord. And if they obey the Lord, then we know that life will be good for them in the future. They will be finding the full meaning of life. They will be happy, and we will also be happy. But it is heartbreaking, to see our children walking in darkness without guidance. And so it is important that we discipline them at the formative while they are young, because it will be very hard to discipline our children when kung naset na yung kanilang mga values. It will be harder for us. At alam natin that yung lack of discipline is of the children. Ito yung one of the reasons then for strains in marriages if you have problematic children. And you can remedy that if you discipline your children while they are still young. So, in closing, maikli lang, our goal is to have a God-glorifying marriage where the husband brings family closer to God through his Christ-like leadership, and the wife gladly does her duties as his helpmate. And as we commit ourselves to the Lord, as I've said, commitment is the key. The Lord will honor that commitment and will grant us a happy, strong, and God honoring marriage. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Sister Heidi. So moving on to the next 2 points. And just looking at this cartoon, it says, it's not what you say, John, it's how you say it. So, well, married couples know this very well. At times, it's not the words, but it's the manner of saying it, which brings us to this point of, aside from spiritual foundation, aside from godly fulfilling our roles, uh, the third point we'd like to make is good communication is so essential in a good or in a strong marriage. The Bible itself says, do two walk together in Amos 3:3, unless they have agreed to meet, or unless they have unity in terms of destination and how to go there. And indeed, it is impossible to walk together unless there is a good communication between the couples. There is no one flesh, really, if the husband and the wife are not communicating properly. And so the heart of a good marriage is also about communication, about exchanging ideas, talking together, uh, and no marriage will survive without a good communication. If the husband and wife are always guessing what the other is thinking, then it will be a disaster. So this is very important. In Ephesians 4:29, we read, let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only such as is good for building up, as fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear. And 2 verses later, let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away from you along with all malice. So usually it goes together. No? If you're angry, if you're wrathful or bitter, then usually bitter words come out also of our mouth, corrupting words. And instead of giving grace, it adds fuel to the fire and adds to the misunderstanding, even conflict within a marriage. And so, what are the essentials of good communication? Again, just briefly, uh, openness and honesty, of course. Unless if you are uh, hiding something or you're not open to your spouse, then there will be no uh, communication. Self-control, especially if there is conflict, if there's some anger, forbearance, a charitable spirit. Again, uh, there's no perfect marriage. At one time or another, the couple will fight or will have misunderstanding, and so this kind of spirit is so important. And good listening as well. It's not just the talking, but again, personally, one of my major lessons in life is that I don't have to talk all the time, and in fact, listening is even better. And this is very important. This is very important to Heidi and me. For example, we shared this to you before, probably you remember this, but we read this book or we heard this somewhere that the author is advising couples to at least have 1 hour talking together, 1 hour a week of talking together. And so when Sister Heidi and I heard that or read that, we were dumbfounded. We couldn't believe it. 1 hour a week. In our case, we talk 1 hour a day or more,
More.
even more. When we travel together, sometimes, and especially now in the pandemic, we're basically together 24/7. So there's a lot of time to talk, and so this is so important. Being able to listen, uh, even though we're not doing all the talking or most of the talking, but listening is so important. So this is one tip that, or one experience would like to share to you. One tip would like to give to you. Make sure that there is open communication before the day is over. Whatever disagreement, whatever sort of fights are resolved through honest, open communication. And this is not easy. We're not saying this is easy because we have different backgrounds, we have different sort of context when growing up. And as a result of the different culture, background, family values, communication can be, that at times hard, and there's misunderstanding. So you have to work on all of this. And then finally, our last point, as you can see from this cartoon, this husband and wife with a barbed wire between them. And the guy saying, apparently, I have done something to upset you. Okay, which of course tells us that whatever misunderstanding, whatever problems encountered in the day will translate to some friction in the bed during the end of the day. And so our next topic, therefore, is promoting romance and intimacy in our marriage. And in Genesis, we read that 2:24, therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. So this is the very definition of marriage: living, cleaving, holding fast, and thirdly, becoming one flesh. And so clearly, this one flesh um, aspect of marriage is about the totality of life. It's not just the physical connection, but really it involves the totality of life, that there is oneness or unity in that life. So it's total sharing. But that total sharing and unity is most beautifully exhibited in the sexual relations of the husband and wife. It is, in fact, an expression of that very oneness, the complete oneness of two people. And sadly, well, according to studies, together with financial, actually, we won't tackle financial management, but that's another important aspect of strengthening our marriage. But the area of most dissatisfaction and conflict is actually in this very arena. And if we skip this, we skip one of the most important and one of the chief sources of conflicts between husband and wife. And what are the causes of problems? Well, one is unresolved guilt. If there is a need to repent and confess the sin, whatever it is, perhaps before marriage, there's some sin involved, then this could hamper, or this could be a big problem in terms of the intimate aspect of marriage. Ignorance and misinformation, and for all of us pastors who counsel those who are getting married, it's surprising how ignorance in this area is so prevalent, about the physical anatomy of the man, of the woman, differences in temperament, which of course will be very crucial in being having a good compatible relationship. And so a lot of the causes of problems in romance and intimacy are not really physical in nature, but more emotional and of course spiritual. And if there's a problem in the bed, it's usually a symptom of a much deeper problem that needs to be resolved. Now, what does the Bible say about it? The Bible is not shy about it. Very clearly in 1 Corinthians 7, it's not even what we're saying, it's the Bible. Now, concerning the matter of which you wrote, apparently there's some issue and in the church, and Paul got to know this. It is good for a woman or a man not to have sexual relations with a woman. But because of the temptation to sexual immorality, each man should have his own wife, and each woman her own husband. And this is the one relevant to our topic. The husband should give to his wife her conjugal rights, and likewise the wife to her husband. For the wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does. Likewise, the husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does. Do not deprive one another, except perhaps by agreement for a limited time, that you may devote yourselves to prayer, but then come together again, so that Satan may not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. Now, as a concession, not a command, I say this, but it's for another time. Well, so the point of Paul is, and Paul was not shy about this, sexual relations within marriage are holy and good, as we get also from Genesis. pleasure in sexual relations are in fact assumed for the husband and the wife. And it is not selfish. It's not just for the individual, but really for the other, for the spouse. And there should be some regularity. It's something that is expected for the husband and wife to be the regular practice. And again, that principle of mutual satisfaction. It's not just one person being satisfied, but it's both of them. Okay, so finally, just a bit of some tips. Again, this is mainly for husbands, but I can go either way as well, of how to keep romance alive in our marriages. Date night, and I'm sure a lot of you are very familiar with this. Not only day night, but date day. Okay, as we grow older, we notice our dates are becoming more of days, not nights anymore. Phone calls and texts to each other, notes, cards, and letters. Of course, this may be a bit passe with text and emails and Messenger and Twitter and whatever other communication media. Gifts, giving of gifts, a bit of music. I don't know if music is something that makes you romantic. I guess it depends on whether you have the same tastes in music. Some getaways once in a while. If you have kids, getting away from kids once in a while. And of course, lastly, surprises. Life will be boring if it's monotonous. And one way to spice up our marriage is to have surprises. Again, both ways. It goes both ways. And so, in ending, let me just wrap this up for both of us. How to strengthen our marriage. Just we gave you four. I'm sure there are others for sure. And in the discussion, feel free to chat and discuss about this. But the first is strong spiritual foundation. That's a priority. A relationship to God over even our spouses. And then faithfully and gladly fulfilling a role, whether husband or wife. Again, based on the biblical mandate and biblical model. Fostering good communication is another practice or another way to strengthen the marriage. And finally, keeping romance and intimacy alive. Now, there are many materials out there. Wayne Mack, of course, one of the authors we're familiar with. You can get hold of these books if you want to know more. But for now, we end it here. And if you have any comments, questions, we'll be here to interact with you all. Thank you for listening to us.
Thank you very much, Pastor Rodel and Tita Haydee, for your talk. Now we'll move on to our Q&A portion, but just a few reminders first. Please keep your questions short and to the point so that we can have more time for as many questions as possible. Also, please avoid asking questions regarding very specific cases that might involve sharing private information. Also, for live questions, please use Zoom's raise hand function to be acknowledged by the moderator, that's me, or send them through the Zoom chat or privately to our RCM Zoom host, Brother Jonathan Medalla, or you can also send them to me, Sister Patricia Gregorio. For those joining via Facebook Live, you may also ask your questions by sending them in the comment section of the FB Live or by sending a private message to the RCM Facebook page. Your questions will be forwarded to the speakers as time permits. So we already have a few questions lined up po. Our first question po for you, Pastor and Tita Haydee. But I think this might be directed more towards Tita Haydee. Since a wife's main role in marriage is to be a helpmeet for her husband, would it be recommended that if a woman wants to pursue or excel in a career outside the home, she shouldn't get married?
It's a tough one. I think it should be, and for me, I'm speaking for me personally, no? For me, I'm convicted, and I think it's the grace of God. I'm convicted that our priority is the home. And the career, if you want to pursue a career, then it will come later. Kasi, especially if you have children, yung window where the children are teachable and their minds are malleable and open for biblical teachings, that is just a short window. And if you miss that, then it has a consequence, no? But your career, it can wait. Like for me, I pursued graduate studies. I even taught in CPAP. But I don't have guilty feelings because I know that I did my job for my children. And now that my children are away, what keeps me sane is that because I know that I was with them when they were growing up, and I know everything that happened to them when they were young because I was there. And that keeps me happy even if they are not with me anymore. So that's my answer.
All right, thank you so much, Tita Heidi, for that question. We have another question here po, but not directed specifically to one of you. Ang question po ay, are there differences in the struggles or problems confronting younger and older couples? What are these, if ever, and how do we address them properly?
Yeah, well, having been married for 40 plus years, we've been young, we've been old. Of course, depending on the generation, I think now we have the millennials getting married, perhaps soon the Gen Z. So there's a lot of difference in terms of culture growing up. But the answer is, I think yes, there are different challenges. When you're a young couple, usually you have uh, lower or more limited financial ability. Perhaps kids are very young as well, babies, and so you're chasing 2-year-olds and changing diapers. Of course, now that we're empty nest, they call it empty nest, and to some it sounds lonely, but for us it's not lonely. In fact, we are so excited about our emptiness. Of course, we miss our kids, our grandkids, but we also enjoy this stage in life where there's no more kids at home and we can be more free. So that's a big difference. When we were younger with kids, that's always the first consideration. If you want to go out, again, there's so many stories we can tell you. We went to Mindoro one time, just the two of us. But you always think of the kids. You always think who will take care of them, and we always want to go home because kids are there. But now that we're emptiness, we can go for days, weeks. Sometimes at the spur of the moment, we can say, okay, let's go there and spend overnight there. And we don't have to worry about kids. So that's just an example of how different stages in life. The other thing is health. Before we can just run together or swim. And now we still swim, but of course, much slower, a lot of health issues. So that slows us down. I don't know if Sister Heidi has something to add on the differences between younger and older couples. Sister?
Again, I would like to speak about my experiences. When I cannot say, and I want to clarify that yung mga sinabi ko kanina, it's like I was parang a very godly mother, but I did not start that way. Especially na we didn't have role models then. We really learned by experience. But for instance, yung submission, that was very hard. It did not come easy. But as I've said, yung spiritual foundation, by the grace of God, we're able to work on that. And through time, I'm able to accept that. And so as I grow older, then I'm seeing the totality of the picture. And so I see the beauty of submission. But before, nandun yung resentment, di ba? Di ko agad ma-accept yon. And even if I decided na stay at home, yet there were so many moments that I was envious of my classmates. There were many times na I was depressed. So it did not come easy. But then, yun nga, by the grace of God, as you go along, tuloy lang, then you are able to change your perspective.
Right, maraming salamat po for that question. We have a forwarded question here po. Ang tanong nila is, how can we biblically and wisely translate these tips and principles to a man considering a woman for marriage and vice versa? conviction of biblical marriage rules, communication, etc.?
Well, I'll give it a first crack. One way is start the communication right there, and make sure that you have on the same page when it comes to these major issues. For example, you can ask your potential spouse, do you agree that spiritual things should be our priority? What do you think about your role as a wife or husband? So again, this is not to totally eradicate all possible disagreements, but at least to prepare the couple if there is, for example, if there is a sharp disagreement on the role of the husband or the wife, and they don't see eye to eye on this in terms of their priorities. For example, again, just to cite an extreme example, one spouse prioritizes, say, earning high salary, so that his or her plan is to, say, work in the Middle East, while the other Christian, of course, would prefer to stay maybe in the Philippines and grow as a Christian here. So some of those very important decisions could be preempted or can be discussed beforehand. So the prospective couple can use these criteria to see where they stand on each of them. How about you? Anything you want to add?
Okay na po.
Okay na po. Okay. Fully agree.
Salamat po. We have another forwarded question here. Ang sabi po nila ay, you said that one of the spiritual foundations of marriage is that the couple should be praying together. Paano po kung di na nila nakasanayan to pray together but they do it diligently but separately?
What do you think po?
You can, if you like to do it, if you're committed to it, it's still possible. Kasi yun nga ang magandang, sorry, epekto nito is you become closer to each other kasi you're able to update each one daily. So mga daily experiences nyo. And we know also that yung praying together, that contributes to your spirituality. So iba pa rin kasi yung you pray separately. Parang may added blessing yung you pray pareho kayo. And even yung mga concerns nyo as husband and wife, and even yung mga family concerns sa pag-uusapan din. So if you want to do it, it's possible by the grace of God.
Yeah, and siguro just want to add that mahirap nga pag late na in the married life, and in our experiences, we started very early by God's grace. That before we sleep, that's the last thing we do. We read a portion of the Bible, and we pray together. And as we shared previously, usually yung communication dun din nangyayari. So yung short, supposedly it's only a few minutes, but it can last half an hour or longer. And that's another way for us to talk together as we wrap up the day, share whatever experiences we had the day, that day. So parang it goes together, so it hits a lot of things. It hits yung spiritual priority because we're praying together. It hits yung communication because we communicate before we pray, and then thanksgiving and then prayer request. And then we also are able to settle any conflicts because we know we're praying. The last thing we're going to do before we sleep is pray. So ang hirap namang mag-pray nang may galit kayo sa isa't isa. So it's also, God used that as a means of grace for us not to let the sun go down upon any anger. Again, we're not perfect. There were times we sleep sort of, facing the opposite direction and not talking much. But again, by God's grace, it's been used for us to address a lot of our sinfulness, weaknesses as sinners.
Maraming salamat po ulit for your answer. We'd like to remind everyone that you can also ask your questions live by raising your hand using the raise hand function here on Zoom, and we will call on you so you can ask your questions to Pastor Rodel and Tita Haydee. But while you might be thinking of your questions, we have a few more lined up here. Actually, this one is a follow-up from the earlier question about the differences in the struggles or problems as young or older couples. So ang follow-up ay, any advice for couples who struggle to spend time together when they are older and their kids are no longer at home?
Ano ba?
How, darling, you want to?
Ikaw muna.
Okay. Well, in our case, kasi it's the reverse. Because all of a sudden we have a lot of time together. Even in my work, I slowed down. I work only I'm like part-time worker, 3 days a week na lang, so half time more or less. So for us, it's the reverse. So what to do if you're later stage and struggling for time? I guess it will have to be in terms of prioritization. But there's so many, of course, there's so many things to consider. For example, financially, if there's some difficulty, maybe that's the reason why the husband or the wife or both need to work still, even at later stage in life, and so on. So there's the difficulty which we realize as well. But if you can afford to take it slowly and have a simpler life, simpler lifestyle, then for us, it's something that really is working up to now very well. Darling, how about you? You have thoughts on that?
I think with the technology, like a simple text, kumusta ka, sweetheart? Mga ganun. Ano ginagawa mo?
Okay.
So it makes it gives a good feel na naalaala ka ng husband mo. It is little things are big in a marriage relationship.
Thank you po for that answer. We have another forwarded question here po. Having expounded on the fundamental biblical principles, what do you think could be some additional principles for a man in the pastoral ministry, or a man considering a call to the pastoral ministry as well as his wife or fiancé?
Well, for this, again, so important. This question is has a lot of ramifications to the relationship, and I think part of the cost of doing or going to the ministry is that the husband and wife must be prepared to, well, for one of a better word, say suffer, because in the ministry there's a lot of heartaches, but there are more joys. Don't get me wrong. There's actually much more joys, but there are a lot of things you have to, again, for one of a better word, say sacrifice. If you have, like me, if you're like bivocational, you have a career, then your career will have to take second or backseat, no, to the ministry. A lot of the decisions, especially major decisions, will have to be filtered through the ministry. So how will this affect the church? How will this affect the ministry? If I take this job, if I go there, if I do this. So these are a lot of, especially during our young or our earlier years, we realized that this is something that will really affect major decisions. So I think both the wife and the husband should be ready before they enter into it. They should be ready to face those tough decisions. Otherwise, they may end up fighting all the time and being bitter once they're in the ministry, and some of these questions are not answered. How about, darling? You have any thoughts on that?
So once the sorry, once the husband, if he feels that he's really cold, then the wife, yung dapat feeling ng wife is, I'm also called to be a pastor's wife, and I should be supporting my husband in the ministry. So dapat ready din yung wife to take on that calling. So she will feel na called din siya to be a pastor's wife.
Thank you so much for that answer. Madami pong pumapasok ng mga questions, pero we'll try to fill in up to what we can with the given time po. But
Go ahead.
this next
We'll keep our
question-
answer short.
Thank you po. This next question I think is directed more towards Pastor Del. Ang sabi po ay, during quarrels, husbands have a tendency to stay quiet. How should he leave the situation in such a way he won't hurt his wife's feelings?
Okay, so in terms of quarrels, I guess one word comes to mind. Again, it's just quick answers because we have some other questions. Humility, so important, humility. So you're the husband, you're the head of the family, but humility, you have to, humble yourself and say sorry or initiate conversation if your wife is not talking to you. So that's one word I'll probably leave with you, given the short time. Yeah.
Yung dagdag ko lang doon, yung iisipin mo na sino ba ang mahal mo? Mas mahal mo ba yung asawa mo o yung sarili mo o mas mahal mo ang Lord? So pag na-settle mo yon, talaga makikipagbati ka na.
Thank you for that.
Okay, maraming salamat po for that. Another question here po is in relation to what you said about praying together. Tanong po ay, would you recommend an engaged couple to practice praying together? How could they develop this godly habit?
Ikaw? It's very important. It's also a preparation for their marriage if they can pray together. So they can set time, yung sa mga dates nila. So they can do that, no? Can study the word and then they can pray together. So and make it regular.
Okay. Thank you so much po. We have another forwarded question here po. Ang sabi po ay, salamat sa mga na-share ninyo. Agree po ako sa kahalagahan ng mag-asawa na mag-usap lagi. Manalangin magkasama at mag-devotion na magkasama. Pero paano kung gusto ng babae pero di type ng lalaki? Maraming din napag-uusapan ng mga sikreto. Di po ba ito nakaka-apekto sa intimacy ng mag-asawa? Paano ito makakatulong sa pagsasama ng mag-asawa?
From the way I get it, one of the spouses, I think the husband, doesn't want, to do the quiet time or parang family devotion. Yeah, it's a challenge. Of course, as a wife, you have to submit to your husband. You cannot force him to have quiet time with you. So that's really a struggle. And yun namang pinag-uusapan, well, in our case kasi, when we talk, the more na less effect sa intimacy namin. Kasi one of the things is, if your wife has a lot of things to say, she won't have an interest on that intimacy part kasi ang dami pang nasa isip niya. So actually, in general, you should let your wife sort of unburden herself before she even thinks about the intimate part of marriage. So that's something to consider naman. Kung ikaw yung lalaki, na if you don't communicate with your wife and she has a lot of things in her heart and mind, then chances are you will have less chance of being intimate with her.
Maraming salamat po. I think we have time for maybe our last few questions. Again, if you guys here on Zoom or even on the watching through FB Live, you have any more questions to Habol, you can send them to us. Another question here po is, what would you advise young couples or young people in church rather, who couldn't seem to find a suitable partner within the church or in the church?
Para ding yan yung, di ba, yung job, sorry pero di ba na-mention dati ni Pastor Rodel, it's like when you are looking for a job, you are searching, hindi lamang dun sa isang church, but you also look for other churches. And so I think looking for a wife, it is really a major part of one's life. So you have to really give time for that. Because finding the right partner can make or unmake your life, your Christian life. So you have to search for her or him.
Okay.
Okay, maraming salamat po for answering our questions. I think that is the last question for tonight. We went through a lot of questions. Maraming salamat po ulit for answering and for your talk po, Pastor Rodel and Tita Haydee. I think we learned tonight that husbands and wives are the ultimate influencers of society as the leaders of the family. Sustaining a good marriage requires a good spiritual foundation. So maraming salamat po ulit. Before